Testing 1, 2, 3. You all hear me okay? Hello?
Oh, God. I got it. How are you, Mr. Hi, Mr. Blevins. How are you? Doing okay? Good. All right. I'm liking this cool weather. Yeah, I love this. This is nice. Right. It's like the Midwest. It's the Midwest weather. I remember. Yeah. Yeah, we're Illinois. So this feels good. Hi, Judy. Hi, Shirley. How are you doing? Good. Yeah, turn this off.
I just want to say something to you. I'm sorry for some of the things that get said and done.
Oh.
I know that you are doing a tremendous job, that you care about us all.
Thank you.
Please know that.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you.
You know, it's not easy being the mayor.
Fortunately, you have a good team.
Yes,
Makes
you
all
do.
the difference.
They have a good leader.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Paula.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
Good, good. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. So it's about 12:59. I would like to ask the folks who are on the phone, if you could please put your phones on mute or silent. If you could please put your phone on mute or silent. If you don't have a mute or silent button, if you hit *6, *6, that will silent your phone. So with that, it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to ask Etta to join us, our chaplain, and lead us in prayer. Etta? Oh, you want to use that one? Okay. Whichever. Go ahead and use that one. Thank you.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, as we center our energy, as we center our thoughts, as we center our hearts on you, who is truly the center of our joy, we thank you for this opportunity that we get together as a community and discuss the mission, the visions, the plans that you have for us. Your word reminds us that you do have a plan and a purpose for us, a plan for us to prosper and to be in good health. And you have kept us in good health throughout this season. And now as we are in the autumn of our lives, in that season of ingathering and harvest, let us always remind ourselves to be grateful for all of your blessings. God, sometimes it's easy for us to fall into negative path and negative words and negative thoughts because of the things that happen around us. But God, we ask that you would move those things and move us into a spirit of praise and thanksgiving, a spirit of praise and thanksgiving that would flow from heart to heart, from hand to hand, from person to person, as we continue to live out the mission and vision that you have so graciously carved out for us here in this community at Florida Presbyterian Homes. We thank you for the opportunity that we get to exercise our faith publicly before you. And with that, we are full of praise and thanksgiving as we lift our hearts to you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Etta. If I could ask the folks who are on the phone, if you could please put your phone on mute or silent, it would be greatly appreciated. That way there's no background noise. If you have a question or comment at any point in time, please take your phone off of mute or silent, and we will get to the agenda right now. So this is an Office of Insurance Regulation. This is an Office of Insurance Regulation meeting, and what that means is every quarter we are responsible to provide to the residents a quarterly update on where the organization is at. The Office of Insurance Regulation is the state entity that we are licensed for the entire campus under the Office of Insurance Regulation. So we provide that on a quarterly basis. And the difference from a regular chat is that in the OIR program, we're required to provide a financial update, to update you on any actions, any motions that the board has taken, and to just give a general review of where the organization is at. Before I get underway here with the agenda, can everyone hear me okay? Can you all hear me okay? All right, good. I'm going to take this off. I recognize it might be helpful to some. So I'm going to take it off, and when somebody comes up, I'll put it back on, okay? So with that, the first thing I'd like to do is, many of you know that Pam Herbert is retiring, and Pam is our Director of Nursing for Assisted Living. I would like to introduce our interim assisted living director, Patricia. Patricia is in the back here by Samanda. This is Patricia Kinigi. Patricia has been with the organization many years ago. She was the MDS coordinator here. And she has moved through her career, and she's returned to us in this interim role. And she's been working with Pam and communicating with Pam over the past week, and so we're really glad. And Patricia's going to come up so the folks on the camera can see Patricia as well. So Patricia is our interim. You're going to see Pam this week as well. We're in the process right now of going through and creating an electronic medical record system for assisted living. So right now, when there are orders and clinical information, is all kept on paper in our system in assisted living. So we are moving to an electronic medical record in assisted living. So I've asked Pam to come back this week and to help work with Patricia and our team through this process. So it's something that you'll see her, and I know people go, why is Pam still here? That's why. She'll be coming in a couple of hours a day this week to help us through that. So thank you, Patricia. Thank you very much. So, did you? Okay, thanks, Patricia. Patricia's extension 111. She's in Pam's office in assisted living on the first floor. So welcome back, Patricia. The other gentleman that couldn't be here today, he's in Mcgrath right now, and that is Dennis de Gloria. Some of you have seen Dennis on the campus. He's presently staying in our Bauer Haynes building. Dennis is here as the interim administrator for Mcgrath. Dennis has over 30 years experience in our field, primarily as an administrator in our field of skilled care facilities. Dennis was here back in December and January as a consultant to Mcgrath. Some of you may remember at the time we had asked Dennis to come in and work with Maria and our team on looking at our admissions protocols and looking at our operations in Mcgrath. So he spent about 2 months with us as a consultant. So Dennis is back as the interim administrator. I will share later on where we're at with the search for the administrator position. So with that, I'm going to move through into the CEO Executive Director report, and I'll go through the board meeting information. And as I said earlier, as part of the Office of Insurance Regulation requirement, we're required to review the most recent motions from the board, and I'm going to go through that. We met last week, the board met last week. The board committees met over the previous 3 weeks, and then they culminate with their meetings with a full board meeting. In the full board meeting last week, there was a motion made by the governance committee to recommend approval of the committee chairs and the officers for next year. So with that, I'm going to read off who they have assigned on the board to be the officers as well as the committee chairs. So Michael Tamney is taking the role of chair. He was the vice chair this year. Now Michael Tamney will assume the role of chair. Elena Nicholas, who is the chair for this year, Elena will become the immediate past chair. So Michael will move from vice chair to chair, and he'll hold that role for 2 years, next year and the following year. Katie Piperata is going to be the vice chair next year. So in that role as vice chair, Katie will be in the role of vice chair. She'll be the eventual chair, and she'll chair for 2 years. Why it's different for some chairs than others is because, like Elena, this next year is her last year on the board. So she had to go off as chair, but she'll stay on as immediate past chair. But normally it's a 2-year role for the chair. Please, Judy.
Joe, would you be willing to publish that information so we don't have to manually write
Sure.
it down?
So Judy's asking if I'll publish it. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll publish it. We'll put it in the scoop, or the Now Read This might be a better venue. You bet. So Janine, will you remind me? Thank you. Bill Cloyd will continue as treasurer. April Novotny will be the secretary next year. The chair committees of each chair, or each committee. For my review, Michael Tamney will chair that committee for my review. Loving Care will be chaired by Michael Tamney. Historically, the board chair always chairs my review as well as the Loving Care Fund. They act as the committee chair. For Quality of Care and Services, Katie Piperata will be the chair. For Strategic Planning, Ron Shuck will be the chair. For Finance, Bill Cloyd will be the chair. And for Governance, Scott Langston will be the chair for next year. So that was voted on by the board through the Governance Committee and approved. Another aspect that was a motion, we had a question that came up with a donation that was made to the organization by a resident. And the bid house had made me aware of this donation that was for something that was fairly significant value. And I asked, what is our policy for accepting gifts of high value? And we found out we don't have a policy for accepting gifts of high value. I asked the question, what is the legal role of Florida Presbyterian Homes in accepting a gift, and what is the legal role of the bid house in accepting a gift? And said, can somebody share the policy? No policy. So the residents in the bid house, in talking about this and looking at this, they carry some risk because we're asking them to sell something on the organization's behalf. So we want to make sure that we clarify what is the role and structure to give them protection, to give the donor protection, and to give the organization protection. So what the board motion was for approval for myself and Scott Langston to work with an attorney who specializes in philanthropy and fundraising. We wanted to get the board's authority to approve that because there'll be an unbudgeted expenditure for doing that. So the board did make that motion and approve for Scott and I to work with an attorney who's familiar with this area of law. So we are moving forward and we'll be meeting with the attorney that Scott has reached out to and start that process of developing policies that structure the relationship between the bid house, the Vol Shop, and Florida Presbyterian homes, as well as create policy for us accepting or denying gifts. So those are things that I wasn't aware of until we got into this discussion, and we decided we really need to get these pieces in place. The next motion that was covered was within the strategic planning process. So I know you guys are aware that we've been in the planning process for about 3 months, where we've had teams that included residents, board members, staff, sometimes people from the outside community as well, if they have a background or experience in an area. We have 3 teams that have completed their reviews of their action plans. Those 3 teams are Independent Living Occupancy. Skylar of Community Outreach and Sales was the facilitator of that team. The other area was Community Impact. Etta and I were the staff leadership on Community Impact. And the last one was Philanthropy. Those action plans have been reviewed by management, approved, and presented to the board in their board meeting. The board strategic planning committee motion for approval for the action plans for independent living, community impact, and philanthropy. So those 3 areas will be implemented starting January 1, 2022. Each of the other areas, dementia, transitional care, Port of Mcgrath, the financial sustainability and systems and process, as well as the wellness programs, the life enrichment initiatives, all of those are under management review. The only area that has been approved, and that was approved in the last board meeting, was the master site plan process. That was approved in the July board meeting, and we are implementing that process, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So hopefully we'll get all of those reviewed within the next month or so, and by the end of this year, we'll present the rest of the action plans to the board in their January meeting. The strategic plan is a management tool. It is the responsibility and the accountability of management to implement the strategic plan. We're the ones as management that get held accountable for whether or not it's successful. So the decision of determining whether or not the plan moves forward is with management. So each of the action teams provide input and direction. Once they completed that exercise, the teams have achieved their goal. They've made the action plan, they presented it forward, management reviews it, management determines if there needs to be any adjustments or changes, makes adjustments or changes if necessary, then present it to the planning committee of the board, and then present it to the board. Again, the reason for that is management's accountable. Nobody's going to say to a volunteer, well, that was a really bad idea, you can't live here anymore. It is the responsibility of management, if something doesn't function in the plan, to hold management accountable. And management is me at that point. So that's the process. Once we have the full plan completed in January, we'll make the plan available for people to come and review. We're not going to distribute the plan. The reason we don't distribute the plan is it's our management direction. It tells where we're going and how we're getting there. We don't want that to be in the public. We don't want our competitors to know everything we're doing in terms of strategy. So it's something that if you want to look at it, we'll set up a time, you can come and look at it and review it, but we can't distribute copies of it because, again, we don't want it getting out into the public, the directions that we're going. The next area that the board motioned, and David will be talking about this in a few moments, is the operating budget. The 2022 Florida Presbyterian Home operating budget was presented to the Finance Committee. It was reviewed and approved by the Finance Committee and then recommended as a motion to the board in their meeting last week, and the board approved. the operating budget. And so we'll go into more detail on that in David's presentation. And I believe you all received the PowerPoint, so you have that information. We'll review it with you. The last motion that the board made was by the Finance Committee to recommend approval to fund the first two steps in our master site planning process. In the master site planning process that was approved back in July, the first two steps that we had, step number one was to do a market analysis, a market assessment, to determine, is there a market for future housing for older adults in our primary market area? Our primary market area is made up of about 12 zip codes, and how we determine the primary market area is we look at where are the zip codes of the people who moved here. You know, where are people coming from? So that's how we determine the primary market area. So we are going to do an assessment with the organization called Clifton Larson Allen, and they will look at and do an assessment focusing on independent living as well as memory care. We want to know, is there a market for independent living? We want to know, is there a market and a need for memory care? Those are two areas that we want to focus on. They will tell us if there is a viable market, and they will tell us what the economics of that market is. So what can people afford? We're also going to look at a rental option as well as a life care option. Right now, all we have is the life care option. We also want to look at the rental option and find out, is there a market for rental? Is it stronger than the market for the life occupancy product? So we're going to evaluate that. The way they look at this as well is they're going to tell us how strong is that market. And the way they do that is they will look and say, okay, you've got X amount of people in your PMA that are age and income qualified. And right now you have this many units that are already in the market. So here we have 64 apartments as an example. They'll look at how many apartments for older adults are in our market area. So they'll determine, let's say there's 2,000 people that are age and income qualified for our campus, and they'll look and say, but there's already 500 units in the market, so that leaves you 1,500 potential units. Nobody's going to say, well, you should be able to build a building of 1,500. You wouldn't be successful. You're not going to get them all. So what they'll look at is about a 10% to 25% ratio. And then they'll take that number and say, okay, we think that there's a market for additional independent living for another 800 units. And they'll recommend to build, say, 50 or 80 or whatever that number is based on that 10 to 25% number. And then once we have that, if competitors start coming in and building, we'll be able to go, okay, the market is shifting. We know, where we're at. Is it going to impact our ability to develop anything in independent living, as an example? So that's what that tool does. The last piece in the tool is to compare our pricing, to look at our pricing compared to all our competitors, to get a sense of where do we fit in the market. So that's step number one. Step number two, and they'll be occurring simultaneously. Step number two is Arch Limited, and Frank Maraca is a firm that does master site planning, and they are architects and engineers by trade. And Frank will be here on November 16th through the 17th. Rick has provided them with a lot of information about our physical plant, like the boilers, it's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, anything that's at a value of over $10,000. Our roofs, our physical plant as a whole, and they'll determine over the next 10 years how much is it going to cost to maintain each of those elements, and what is the lifespan of each of those elements. So we can start to, when we do our capital budget, we'll know, okay, we're going to have to replace a roof on this building at this date. or we're going to have to replace our boiler systems by this date, or we're going to have to replace HVAC by this date. And why that's important in master site planning is, imagine you're down the road and you're saying to a bank, we need a loan, or we go to the bond market and say we need a loan for $10 million to build a building, and we don't know that a building over here is problematic and we're going to be investing $5 million into it. You want to know that. You want to know, what our existing campus, what the costs are to maintain and function, before you go into trying to find out how much money you can access to build something new. It would be like in your homes. If you knew the boiler is going to go out soon, it may impact how much money you spend on something else in your house, right? So that's kind of why you do it this way. So the board made a motion and approved the funding. Those are both capital projects. So if we move forward with construction down the road, if there is a market and we can move forward, we'll be able to capitalize those. So it won't hit our operating budget. If we can't move down the road for whatever reason, those items will hit the operating budget in the audit. The auditor will come in and say, oh, you never did those things. You can't capitalize those. They have to hit, and they'll hit after the audit. So both of those projects were approved to move forward. So those were the motions of the board. Any questions on the motions of the board of the recent board meeting? Okay. All right, we'll move forward. The next item, occupancy levels and reports. We have 9 apartments that are vacant. Of the 64 apartments that we have, there are 9 apartments that are vacant. We have 1 house that isn't spoken for, that we don't have under contract, that we don't have a buyer for. So we have 1 house at this point. And I know Cher was showing that house today, and she's hoping she'll get a closing on that one as well. In assisted living, we have 5 assisted living apartments that are available, 49 that are occupied. In healthcare center, occupancy as of this morning was 47 out of the 68. I want to talk a little bit about that. We, as an organization and management team, we worked with Maria Sager, who was the interim administrator before Dennis, and now working with Dennis. And we said we really want to make sure that whatever our occupancy, we keep it to a number that we can make sure we're adequately staffing and providing care. There's a license that we're required to operate within in terms of our staffing. And we said to our admissions team, we're going to basically hold our admissions. We don't want to exceed into the upper 50s. We want to hold it somewhere between 45 and about 55. Because of staffing, we want to make sure that we're not in a position where we're not able to provide the level of care to our residents and our guests that we're accustomed to. So the other issue we have is holidays are coming up. So we'll have staff taking time off. So we didn't want to push up and say, okay, let's get more occupancy at a time where it's already difficult to recruit and retain staff when we will start to see holiday time and PTO. So rather than pushing and saying, just keep adding, we get the revenue, we said, let's put a number and hold it until we're able to staff. And then once we get the staffing, then raise the number up. And so we've communicated to the hospital that our focus is primarily our own residents. So if our own residents have a need, we'll provide that care. But we're managing referrals for outside, from people from the outside, so we can stay within that number and not have any issue with staffing during a time where we know it's going to be really tough. So any questions on occupancy or comments? Okay. Resident satisfaction survey update. So these are things, when you guys did the resident satisfaction survey, these were the key areas, and I'll go over where we're at with these areas. Management responsiveness. There was a tool that was presented to the resident council. They took the tool and created a one-page kind of cheat sheet for the tool. The cheat sheet is being reviewed as part of the resident handbook review. The more detailed document will be in the resident handbook, and the cheat sheet will be available to all the residents. And basically what that is it's saying to management, this is what we have to provide for the residents in terms of communication. So things like response times to issues. This is the time frame we need to respond by. This is our goal. And also for residents, I get, sometimes on a weekend, I'll get, there's this many ants at the gazebo. Or this, I want my wall painted, this color. On a weekend, I get that. On a weekend, I can't do anything about the ants at the gazebo. I can't paint the wall on a weekend. So it's just knowing kind of when and what and who to contact. Because a lot of residents, you move in and you go, who do I contact for this? Who do I contact for that? So it ends up, I get a lot of that. And we just want to make sure that everybody knows where to go to get answers and who to communicate with. Because for me, it's hard to, it's the best scenario is a situation where something happens and the resident immediately knows who to go to and try to get it fixed immediately, rather than saying, okay, on the weekend when I'm out and getting it to me, and then I say, well, did you contact security or did you contact the nurse? No, I contacted you. I'm like, well, it'd be faster if you were able to get to the right person. And we haven't done a good job getting you that information, so you'll have it. So that's what we're working on, and that'll be through the resident handbook. You guys had done a survey about what your preferences are for communication. We're working on creating a matrix to provide to all of the staff that are responsible for communication throughout the organization, so they know this resident likes to receive a hard copy. This resident likes email. This resident likes to get a phone call. So we're still working on that tool and hope to get that tool by the end of this month, I think is what we're shooting for, to get that tool in place. We have shared the survey results with each of those team members, and when I say team members, I mean Carol, because Carol does the scoop and NRT and so on, so she knows what people's preferences are. Allison, because she does the wellness newsletter, so she knows what people's preferences are. Skylar, for any community outreach pieces that she sends out, and Janine and I for the updates that we were sending out weekly. In dining, the dining room is reopened. That was part of our goal in moving that forward. Please, Judy. That's it. Yeah.
Is there any plans to have an administrator off duty on the weekend with appropriate time off at another time?
We reported that to the residents last year. We have a manager on call. So we've had that for over a year. And the manager on call comes in 4 hours during the weekend, and they cover. The people who are here on campus in each of the areas has a lead person. So if something's in nursing, it goes to the lead RN. If there's something in AL, it goes to the lead person in AL. If it's something in facilities, they contact Rick or Jono. So it's not on call for most of that, but there is someone who is on call as one of the members of the executive team. They're not to be called for bugs on the gazebo, for, the stuff, but that's what we get. Honestly, Judy, that's what we get. So it is the times that they would be called. Let's say there's a hurricane that we're finding is now turning and heading our way. That manager on duty gets called, calls everyone to come in, and everyone comes in at that point. those are major issues. Anything major is when that person would be called in. But otherwise,
You know, what, 4 hours they're here? I mean, has that been covered?
that hasn't, because it's been flexible. It's been a time where they can come in between 8 o'clock and noon on Saturday or Sunday, and they determine which day they're going to come in. And they do rounds. They do rounds. It's published in the handbook, and we just haven't finished the handbook. Etta? You're here, and Etta's here on Sundays too. So she's our person on the site on Sunday. But there is that on a weekly basis. David?
Yeah, with the 2 major holidays coming up yet this year, Thanksgiving and Christmas,
Yeah.
is it possible to have a guest that has been fully vaccinated join you for those 2 only meals?
Good question. So what David's asking is about having a guest in the dining room, David?
Yes,
Okay.
for only those 2 meals.
Right now, no. So it could change, and I'll talk with our clinical team about that. But right now, it would be no. And the reason for that is it puts a real burden on staff to say, we've got to collect cards from people and check cards to make sure they've been vaccinated. And I don't want to, right now, I don't think we're in a position to do that, but I will look into that for the holidays. That's a good question. That also applies to the guest rooms. So I know that people want to start booking the guest rooms. The challenge we have is in housekeeping. We've got 2 housekeepers that are scheduled to start this week. So Mary Willis is also going to stay on for the rest of this month, which helps us. So our hope is that now we meet on Friday, and we're going to talk about, do we now have enough housekeepers to open up the guest room, the 3 guest rooms to residents. The differences with the guest rooms for this run, for the holidays, one person can't take up all 3 guest rooms. One person can't book, for a full week of the guest room. We want to have it where multiple people can get advantage of getting the guest rooms. We've had residents ask over the past week or so, can I have somebody stay in my apartment with me who's visiting? Or can I have somebody stay in my house? You can. You can now. If that's something you want to do now because of the vaccine levels that we have with our residents and our staff, as long as they don't go elsewhere in other buildings. Because again, we don't want to be trying to police who got vaccinated, who didn't, from outside the community. So we would ask that if you do have someone that you want to come and stay with you, just fill out the forms that we have that Ann or Carol has so we know how many people are in the house. The reason we do that is not because we're nosy and we just want to know who you're having over. The reason we do that is if there was an emergency and the fire department came and said we have to make a determination on whether or not to close the campus, they want to know how many people are in each apartment, how many people are in each house, because they go door to door and they want to know if they come in, how many people should I expect to see when I go in, so they know if they vacated or not appropriately. So that's why we ask that. So if you have people that you want to come as your guest in your house or your apartment, just start letting Ann or Carol know so we have that information. For your own safety, I'll be right there, Pat. For your own safety, I would ask you consider that they're people who've been vaccinated, that they're not symptomatic. You don't want to invite people into your apartment or house if they're showing symptoms of flu that potentially, even though you're vaccinated, you're still at risk. You can still catch the virus. So that's why. Pat?
How long can guests stay at our house?
There is about a week to 2 weeks is the length of time they could stay.
We have people staying a lot longer than that.
Yeah, if people can inform me who's staying longer, And the reason we have that time frame is because you guys are the residents. You're the ones who live in the house or apartment. It isn't for people from the outside to come and squat and do their squatters, in your house or apartment, because it affects the whole campus. It's not just you. And so that's why we set a time limit, so we can't have people who are just kind of arbitrarily moving in. And it sounds crazy. I'll tell you though, I had in one community I worked, there was a resident that came to me and said that they believed that the son of two of our residents, husband and wife, was squatting in the parents' apartment. And I visited with the parents and found out he was. He was basically just kind of moved in. And when I met with him, he said, well, it's because they both have some level of dementia, and I want to take care of them and all this. And we said, you can't live, you don't have a contract, you can't live in your parents' apartment. What we learned and what we found out in that first meeting was what he was doing was he had asked his father for the $500,000 or more to invest in GoDaddy, in names of websites. He took basically all his dad's money, he blew it on websites that he thought he'd be able to sell for millions of dollars. The mom had very high acuity dementia. The father had physical challenges that he had. And what the son would do is he would throw a mattress across the door and sleep in front of the door so his mother couldn't get out. And so that's why we have rules like that you just can't have people move in. And that's why it's that 2 weeks is kind of the cap, Pat. Other questions or comments around that? Okay, we'll keep moving forward here. Planning action on dining. We did our SWOT analysis as part of the strategic plan, and a lot of the feedback we get, and it isn't just from this action planning team, is there aren't healthy options. There are very few healthy options. The other thing that we get is our recipes are old. They're really dated recipes. And when I talked about this with Dean said when he first worked here, he said this was the same recipe books. And comes back and it's the same recipe books. So the issues that we're having around quality and diet are tied to the fact that we've always had the same recipes for decades. So we reached out to 3 different agencies that provide dining support and services, and they are going to give us estimates on replacing our menus, and we're asking them to look for more healthy options. So every once in a while you want that meatloaf, or you want that cheeseburger, or that fried chicken, or biscuits and gravy. We'll have that, but we also want to make sure that people have healthy options. I believe that we're missing the market. I believe people aren't moving here in many cases because they look at the menu and say, I can't eat this. I mean, we've had conversations here about that. So I think that that's the case. And so we want to replace our menus, our recipes and our menus. The other thing we're asking of these 3 companies is we want menus that you could look at it and say, I can get this gluten-free. Here's the icon. Here's the picture that tells me they can serve this gluten-free. Or here's the picture that's low sodium. That item's low sodium. That's what I want. Or here's something that's sugar-free or low sugar. That's what I want. So you'll be able to look at a picture on a menu and know which items are for diet, which items are for gluten-free, which items are for low sodium, and you can make decisions based on information and knowledge. So we had one call last week with a company, and I think Dean and I are doing a second call later this week with another company and hoping to replace all our recipes and menu items. So we also not only have the comfort food options, but have more healthy options. So we're moving in that direction. Any questions, Sherry? Yeah. So Sherry's, for the folks on the video watching this that maybe couldn't hear her, and if I misstate, please correct me, but what Sherry is saying is that people need the healthy options, and she feels very strongly about that personally. And we have items every once in a while, like hot dogs, that are questionable. The thing that I think we have to find a balance, right? If we just say from now on everybody's eating Sprouts, you guys will have a fit. There won't be, we'll have a lot of problems. But we got to find a balance, right? And there are. Yeah. Yep. And I think that's the key, is to find that balance. And the action team that we have, once we get copies of menus, we're gonna meet with that action team and we're gonna review the menus, and then I want Chef to prepare some of the items that they select so we can see what do they actually taste like and get a feel for these menus, because it looks like there'll be 2 to 3 different companies that'll present menus and options. So it is, it's something that, it was interesting because we contacted a company called Compass, and Compass is huge. If you look up the term Compass and food services, it's like the largest food service provider in the world, not just our country. And they initially, when I talked to them, they said, well, we'll take over your dining program, we'll manage it. And I thought, no, that's not what we want, because what they'll do is they'll add on an 8% management fee. So the cost will go up really significantly. And I said, no, all we want is recipes and menus with icons. That's it. We don't want you to take over our dining program. And he said, well, no one's ever asked us for that. I'm not sure where you're going to find that. To his credit, he did his own research, and he said, here are 2 companies that you should talk to that can do that. So he said, apparently this is growing. What you're asking for is becoming more prevalent. So Dean and I are following up. There was a 3rd company that we had known about. So I'm hoping we can get this ball rolling and get this, changed out. Sure. Please, Shirley. Yeah.
I have certain GI issues. I've been remote as a age. And I can't say enough positive about the way, and when I say to Thelma, may I please have only chicken and sweet potato or whatever it is, I am accommodated on that.
Good.
I do not make your needs known.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And it is what you're spot on. Let the staff know. I mean, let them know. We can do better in terms of options, and that's where I want to make sure that there's options for people. But please. The dietitian is a contract dietitian who's here once a week for a few hours. They don't create the menu. What they're doing is they're evaluating for Port of Mcgrath, what are we meeting the requirements for the license for Port of Mcgrath in terms of dietary. And every once in a while a resident will say, I want to meet with that dietitian to review my diet. We can do that. If somebody says, I want to meet with the dietitian, we can set that up, but that's pretty much all they're doing, is reviewing to make sure we meet the license requirement for nutrition at Port of Mcgrath. It is for Port of Mcgrath, and it's the same menu. So they get it at Port of Mcgrath. That's the only area that's licensed for the dietary. So it's signed there, but what you guys get is a copy of that isn't signed. Other comments, questions on that? Okay. Life enrichment. The life enrichment planning team is headed by Samantha. They've recently they submitted their action plans to me, and they're under review right now. I know some of the things that they're looking back at are going back to the weekly movies, and some things in terms of trips and things that were done in the past, and trying to get those back in place. So that team action plan is under review. The wellness, emotional, and physical. That team was led by Allison and by Teresa Montoya in social services. The two things that I think I'm really impressed with that they came up with, one is a dimensions of wellness assessment tool. And one of our residents recommended that we have these clinical assessments, but we really don't assess where people are at in terms of the dimensions of wellness. How do they feel about themselves emotionally, physically, cognitively, socially? Where are the things that they grade themselves on where they're at? And so they've created this Dimensions of Wellness tool. They were talking with the professor who was the original creator of the tool to kind of fine-tune it for our residents. It's going to be rolled out to new residents, and they'll take that just prior to moving in, and then we'll meet with them on an annual basis to see if they need any support or any assistance in addressing any of their dimensions of wellness. So we're going to test it there, but it's something that if it's well received and it has a value to those new residents, we want to roll it out to any resident who wants to participate in that program. When I was in Madison, we had a similar tool, and we had a partnership with the University of Wisconsin Pharmacy School, and the students would do the assessment, and then they were assigned a resident, and the students would meet with that resident on a quarterly basis to see how were they progressing, and if they needed additional support or assistance. Maybe at some point somebody had a loss of a loved one, and they've changed in terms of how they viewed their emotional well-being. That program would help connect them to get the support they needed during that period of time. And it was really well received. It was an excellent program. So that's the type of thing we want to build and grow and evolve here for all our residents. On facilities, I think you're noticing Rick is putting in the scoop when there's going to be window washing or when there's going to be power washing, so you guys have advance notice, so you'll know when these things are coming up in advance of when we do the work. So we're trying to be more proactive than reactive, be more proactive and get the information out to people in advance so they know what's coming in terms of facilities and the work that they're doing. Was there any questions or comments or thoughts? Okay. Staffing efforts. This, for our entire field, this has been the biggest challenge in our field. And I've talked to you guys many times. This is not a surprise. Before COVID, I was always participating in a survey that was a national survey asking, what do you think the biggest challenge is for our field? This survey's got to be 10 years old now. Every year, it was staffing. And the reason for that, and what we were projecting going forward, was the baby boomers. We were at about 40 million people age 65 plus. For a number of years, it kind of hovered in that number. And then all of a sudden with the baby boomers started going like this, and the highest peak is going to be at about 84 million people 65 plus, and that'll occur in about 6 years. But it's been going like this steadily for the past 8 years. So we know the number of older adults is growing. The number of people to provide care to them is going the other direction. We're seeing a lot of people in our field, especially in nursing, that were in their 50s and 60s who are now saying, I'm done, especially with COVID. I think a lot of people got burnt out with COVID and are now retiring and getting out of the field completely. There's a positive in that we believe because of COVID, nursing schools are growing. And we're seeing the number of applicants for nursing school is going up. The problem is it can't go up fast enough. There's no way with the number doubling of 65 plus that it's going to go up fast enough. So maybe 15 years from now, that'll be really good that we have nurses. But for now, it's really tough. Yeah, you'll be 108, Sam? Okay, hang around. You'll want to be there. But that's the challenge. That's the challenge. And so we have a recruiter, Janet, who comes from healthcare, and Janet is focusing primarily on nurses and CNAs. And she is actively recruiting constantly. We're looking at international nursing as well to determine, can we build relationships with schools in Puerto Rico and in other places that we can start to bring people over here to provide nursing care and support, because the labor pool isn't there to support the residents that we need in place. We have the administrator position. We have an interview tomorrow. This will be the second interview for the candidate. Initial interview was just kind of a getting to know you to see if we thought they would be a viable candidate. We did. And so that person's coming in tomorrow, and hopefully, that will move forward and we'll be able to have an administrator for Port of Mcgrath. One of the differences with what Maria Rivera's role is and what this role is in Maria's role, she was involved with assisted living as well. In this new role, we just want the administrator to focus on Port of Mcgrath and just Port of Mcgrath. That is enough. That is enough of a project and an effort that we don't want them trying to do two jobs. So the administrator that we're hiring will focus solely on Port of Mcgrath, and they will also have our risk management initiative. So that's safety issues and risk management. They'll be responsible for that as well. The assisted living, we have Patricia, who is here as the DON for assisted living on an interim basis. That position will become a little different than it was with Pam. Pam was responsible for all the strategic initiatives and all of the growth in assisted living, as well as the person who was doing the day-to-day support. And as the needs of our residents are changing, that position will be a straight DON, which means they won't be leading from a strategy level. Remember with Alexis left the organization to move to Orlando Health in April. That position of Associate Executive Director has been open. We've been recruiting for that position over the past month. We've recruited and hired an Associate Executive Director. Tasha Saka is starting hopefully next week. If we get all the background checks and fingerprinting, get all that stuff done, hopefully we'll be able to get her in next week. In that role as Associate Executive Director, she's now going to be the strategic lead for assisted living. So the DON will focus on the clinical and day-to-day, And Tasha will focus on dementia programming, memory care support, life enrichment, all of the programming elements of assisted living at a high level. So in that role as Associate Executive Director, Samantha in life enrichment will report to Tasha. Cher and Skylar will report to Tasha in marketing and sales. IT will report to Tasha in marketing or IT will report to Tasha. She'll pick up that piece as well. Tasha's background, she was the administrator of an assisted living and memory care here in Lakeland. She is presently the wellness director for a medical center that is geared towards older adults here in Lakeland. She chaired the Alzheimer Walk this past weekend. She's very connected in the community. She's very well known. She's worked with Allison on a number of community committees, so Allison knows her really well. We feel like we really lucked out because she's got a background in marketing and sales. She's licensed or certified for dementia programming. She has the license for assisted living, so she's already licensed to provide assisted living as an administrator. So all the pieces are really solid. We feel really good about. Once she's here, we'll introduce you to Tasha, but feel like it's a really good fit, for the organization and where we're going. Let's see. I've already gone over strategic planning. So with that, are there any questions on anything that I talked before I introduce David? Okay. All right, I'm going to invite our CFO, David Larson, to come up, and David is going to go through and walk through the budget and where we're at. Do you want this mic?
I want the
Oh,
mic.
shoot. Okay. All right, let me give you this one. Okay. And a couple of things I want to touch base on the budget, and David's going to go through the PowerPoint presentation. There you go. That's it. David's going to go through the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll take questions and comments after David's presentation. The budget, this is the time of year where we go through the process of building the operating budget for the next year. We have reviewed it with the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee had approved it. It then went to the full board. The full board approved it at that point. We're all aware in the organization we added, I'm going to take this off again. We added, remember we had a wage increase for all hourly employees? The total between that increase and the bonus program that we have for compression, so people who are longer tenure could stand to make more for their attendance bonus, the total of that is over $300,000. When you think of last year's operating budget, last year our net profit was $200,000. So it gives you an idea on how much movement labor is. Labor is about 50 to 55% of our budget. So when we add that much expense, it's significant in the operation. But it also affects how we provide care and service to our residents and trying to retain and recruit people and be competitive in the market. And that's the major challenge that we've had in recruiting and retaining. That salaries become more important than ever before to what people are comparing. And when you have the Amazons and the McDonald's of the world and Walmart's paying 15, I think, was it Sam's Club or what was the one that went up to $17 an hour recently? Costco.
Yeah,
Costco went up to 7. So that's the world we're in. And it's how do we compare and how do we compete?
And with the holidays coming up, everyone's trying to boost their staff to cover all the retail that's going to be happening. It's going to make it really tight these next few months until January passes, and that, assuming the supply chain can catch up, right? If you've been watching the news, the They say they can't build enough warehouse space to manage all the supply that's being backed up on the ports, but, you know, it's such a ripple effect.
Before I turn it over to David, too, every year, Ziegler, which is an organization that does bond financings in our field, they survey CFOs to find out what is the increase they're projecting for next year. They're at this, about 4% is the increase they're projecting. The majority is projecting an increase of 4%. The previous year's projection was 3.5. So we're seeing this impact in our industry of the added cost of labor that's affecting everyone in our field. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David.
And fortunately, on that survey, the highest was 12%. Can you imagine?
Yeah, somebody passed at 12%. I don't know
Can't
how.
imagine. I don't think I've ever been part of a community that did that kind of an increase. But staffing will be a challenge at least for the next year, if not 2 years. Anyway, so let me see if I can get this working. Might have to run it from the back.
Oh, I can't get out.
Yeah, it's on, it buzzed,
So you tell me what I need to do.
just hit the space bar.
Oh, I'm hitting it.
Maybe it's been up for so long that
You know how to
I think
get
you
this
just closed
up?
it. It's the icon down in the systems
Space bar, and I
tray.
got that. Oh, that's it. I can just hit off the... Thank you.
Oh, okay. It shows it's good battery. Anyway, yep. Yeah, yeah, magic. So these are the slides we have for the presentation, which you're all probably well versed in it by now since it was passed out before today. Just covering the quarterly financials up through this year, and then the budget review and the outlook. Joe, if you could go to the next, if you're running it, or Janina, you running it? Okay. I think you just need to hit the space bar.
Okay.
Go ahead. So these are the two covenants that we're required to monitor for our bond holder, we have one bond holder, and now it's South State Bank. It was Center State until they were taken over or bought out by South State. But it goes to, I showed the last 4 quarters just to show the progression of these results. And we've been growing in the debt service coverage ratio. We can't have any less than 1.25, and we're at 3.99 at the end of September. For those of you that aren't quite sure what that means, the debt service coverage ratios, effectively, you take the 1 year of debt service that the company has in principal and interest, and you divide that into the last 12 months, effectively, of entrance fees received and operating cash profit. So when you take out the effects of depreciation and all the non-cash entries, you have a cash profit. Add in the entrance fees, take that whole number for the last 12 months, divide it by the 1 year debt service, and this says that we technically have 4 years that we could pay. 3.99 represents a year factor, so we technically have about 4 years based on the amount of cash that the community has generated in entrance fees and operations. It's a 4 times ratio. The bank wants us at 1.25, just a little bit over 1 year, and we're at 4 years. So as that grows, it makes us more solvent, if you will. The debt to net assets ratio, that's the threshold of 1.25 is the maximum you want to be at. What that represents is the amount of debt that the company has divided by the total equity, effectively. So if that number is above 1, then effectively the company is underwater because they have more debt than what the equity is for the community. But since we're at a 0.61, that means that the debt represents 60% of the entire equity, which is the accumulated income and expense over the life of the community since 1955. Here's the balance sheet. I have it September of this year compared to September of last year, and also the 12 months that was ended this last for our audit as a comparative. Not really a whole lot of change. The operations have been somewhat steady, per se. Cash has increased a little bit over $1 million from September last year to September of this year. Most of that has been with the government funding that we've been getting, with the PPP funds and the HHS funding. Investments have increased from this year to last year, from 17.6 million to 20.4 million. And that's majority in, mostly in SunTrust and Bank of America. We have our minimum liquid reserve with Bank of America, and it's gone up quite a bit. We're actually a little bit over $1 million overfunded. The minimum liquid reserve is the amount that we're supposed to have as cash in a separate bank account required by the state that can't be touched. And it's just a requirement by the state. It's the calculation that we go through every year. We determine what that amount is. Right now the amount is, well, 1 million less. It's like 4.9 million, I think, for the minimum liquid reserve. And we have $1 million more than that. So we actually have some headroom there, so if the market tanks like it has in the past, there's room there that the market could tank upwards to $1 million, or roughly around 20% of that account, and we'd still be okay. We wouldn't have to pull money out of operations to go fund that. So we're covered there. But the other part of it is the SunTrust, I guess it's Truist. Maybe they changed their name to Truist. It's where all the Loving Care funds are. We have the Loving Care Endowment Fund, we have the Loving Care Fund, and then we have roughly $2 million in unrestricted gifts that we're just growing according to the investment policy. And I believe the Loving Care Fund and the Loving Care Endowment Fund right now is combined around a little bit over $10 million. So the market's been good to it. The folks over at that investment company, the management team, when the market has been going a little bit like this, our investments have been going like this. So they know what they're doing. I try and watch what they're doing so I can do for my own. But it's a sort of kind of a back-ended investment advisor. Liabilities, there's really only, they haven't switched a whole lot. Total liabilities went from 33 million to 34.6, roughly $1.2 million change. Main difference there is the deferred entrance fees. Essentially, it just means as we have more people moving in, that adds to the entrance fees, which adds to the deferred revenue. But the switch there between the long-term debt and current liabilities, that was just essentially a classification. When we came to the end of the audit, the PPP funds that we received last year were recorded as a long-term liability, and the auditors, there was a new pronouncement came out, and we had to change it to a current liability. So it was just a classification from long-term to current. So that's why you see a net change between the two. It's about the same amount if you would do the math. And then the equity section, so there's our equity of the current period net income loss. This year compared to last year is an even $1 million increase. And that's everything. That's all the investment act, and majority of the income that we're getting when we get into the other slides is in the investment gains. The return on the investments has been very good to us. It does fluctuate quite a bit. I think even in this month, September, we had a decline of over 700, but then it has already recovered. But that's pretty much the bulk of the revenue side, because the operating side, we're really cutting on the edge as far as the revenue that we're generating is being paid out primarily in salaries and that struggle that we're having. So here's the operating. essentially the income statement. This year, September 2021 compared to the same time last year, and then the 12-month period for last year. So you can see that the operating margin, I mean, that's what we call our controllable. The operating revenue less operating expense, we know what the interest is going to be. Then under that, that's what we kind of call our operating margin, or what we call the controllable bottom line. But
Other revenue.
I'm sorry?
What is other revenue?
I'll get to there. But I just wanted to point out that our margins are thin, or actually even red right now, as of September. And these are in thousands, so it's not $404 we're under $404,000 in operating margin. The other revenue, as Sam was pointing out, that's all of our investment returns. It's probably about 10% realized gains, 90% unrealized gains. But that's generally what's in that other revenue amount. Other expense would be depreciation and other non-operating type expenses, but pretty much that would be depreciation expense. So we have a net income loss this year of $1,799,000, and compared this time last year, we were at $799,000. And the main difference has been the return on investments. Next. This is the cash flow statement. So the positive here is that even though we're operating at a loss, at net loss on margin, we do have an operating net income of $1,799,000, but that with the entrance fees received, we still are cash flowing on the operating side at $3,281,000. Property, plant, and equipment, we've spent so far year to date $1,004,000, but $517,000 went for the ALF 5-unit conversion, and we did build the house down here at 33 Lake Hunter, and that was around $300K. So even though this is a higher number that we've had in years past, we've had some specific things that wouldn't be part of the normal ongoing operation as far as maintenance capital.
David, is that house sold?
Lynn asked if that house was sold. Yes, actually the house was sold and paid for by the gentleman that moved into it. So even though and we have to show it gross. So the cost of the house was in the $1,390,000, but the cash from it came into the net LOF received in the $2,086,000. So it's there. It was just paid for. Now, the net change in limited assets, $1,762,000, even though it seems like a detriment to the cash statement, it's actually not, because that's how much the assets increased in market value. Since it didn't go into checking account cash, it went into investment cash, you have to show it this way. Last is payments on debt, $299,000. That's actually payments against the bond. And Sam, I did have an error. That is not proceeds from debt. That's actually payments on the bus loan. I just forgot to change the description. But we paid down principal on the debt of $306,000, which essentially used all of the cash flows, all the operating for the year. Our total net cash went from $4.8 million to $4.7 million. Okay, next. Let's see what we got. Now, what everyone's been waiting for. And I know I'm over time by 15 minutes. Accounting always gets the end of the report. I don't know if that's by design or what. I don't know. Well, I guess it's so exciting, right? Okay, moving on. I wanted to include this slide. When we first started building the budget, we started building in that June area. Essentially, I wanted to bring this up to show you that CPI right now at the end of September is 5.8%. And I remember seeing the announcement that they're increasing the Social Security 6%. I guess it's 5.9 or 6%. But when we were first looking at this, we always We look at this number as an indicator of what we think that's how it's going to be impacting the budget. And when we saw it starting to creep up, talking to some various folks, and actually the folks at the Truist investment advisors, they saw that yes, the CPI was increasing, but they anticipated there would actually be decline or tapering off. And it looked like that's what was happening in August when it went from 5.8 down to 5.6. And then it was a little bit of a surprise when September came out and it's got back up to 5.8. We didn't build into the budget that level of expense increase. All the known factors that we do have with wages, contracts, management contracts, professional service contracts, pest control, landscaping, insurance, real estate taxes. We know what those increases are because it's baked into the contract. Well, the challenge is going to be as in wages that everyone knows about.
What does CPIU stand for?
CPIU stands for Consumer Price Index Urban, and this is for the South region, which is the bottom half, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Carolinas. So this is the Consumer Price Index cost of what items, energy, food, all the essentially staples that we buy, what is going up on average as compared to last year. And its source is Bureau of Labor and Statistics, so I have a hot link and I go check that every once in a while. Maybe more so during the budget process. But anyway, CPI is going at 5.8%, and in all the communities I have been involved with for the past 20 years, typically we raise the monthly fees by the CPI, because that's what our expense is going to be, most likely. But we decided not to do that. We're anticipating that CPI will taper off. It won't sustain at this level. Although it is going to be a challenging time, we're seeing the shortages across the country, but we're anticipating that by the time we get into next year, it will taper down and 4.5 will be plenty, or not plenty, but enough to cover our operating expenses. I can tell you this, that what Joe was talking about with the wages, that we've had increases in agency and staffing, and just staff increases is trying to keep up with the staff so they aren't leaving us for the 17 bucks an hour and whatnot. That we felt that 4.5 was the number to get to, but we are budgeting at a loss. That's what we actually anticipated when we were looking at the wage adjustment this last summer, that it was going to probably take, our estimates then were between 3 and 5 years to recover from the rolling impacts that we're putting into place for the wage increases. So we are technically anticipating losses, operating losses, from now until at least another 3, possibly 4 years. But eventually we'll turn the tide. The accumulation effect of these things will settle. And that's the plan. That's the plan that we have now, and we're measuring against that. Entrance fees, and we round it to the nearest dollar instead of having to deal with pennies. Entrance fees are increasing 5%, rounded to the nearest 500 bucks. And then skilled nursing, it's 4.5%, rounded to the nearest dollar. Effectively, that's $5 a day is what the rate's going up to. And then outside residents have an increase of $100 a day, above the resident daily rate. And what that means, we are actually now at $100 more than outside. So outside residents pay 400 bucks a day, if you will, versus 300 bucks a day. But we're bumping that up another 100. We looked at our competition, and we also looked at the losses in the health center, and found that if we would be well within market, if you will, if we go up another 100. So there's going to be a $200 disparity between outside and residents. Now the benefit to that is we're going to present, it'll be the benefit for residents coming in, is that will increase the entrance fee medical deduction from $30,000 to probably $60,000 or maybe a little bit more, because our outside CPA firm calculates what that medical deduction benefit on the entrance fee based on this calculation here between these two daily rates. So we'll anticipate at least that will be a benefit for the residents coming in. Our 22 budget comparative. So here's the budget compared to what we project the rest of this year is going to be, and then a comparison between the two. Our residential housing, we now have 116 units. The unit that was purchased or built on 33, now up to 116. We're only budgeting 96% occupancy, even though we're probably a little bit higher than that. The problem with budgeting higher than that percentage-wise is there will be attrition. People are going to be moving across the campus. You are going to have some vacancy time. If we budget at what we're currently running, which might be 98, 99%, that's 98, 99% today. If we have vacancies, then and we're trying to budget at that high level, we're always going to be behind the 8 ball. So it's smart, just with being in the industry and knowing the attrition and movement, to not really go above 96% occupancy. Apartment living, there's a sizable jump there. Even though it looks like 5.8 units, it's actually a 13% bump that we're anticipating as an average for all of 2022. The reason we feel confident that that number can be reached is because of all the investment we've been doing with our new marketing company, Attain, where they redid the website and they're now focusing on the direct mail and other pieces that will be able to get people in to hit that census mark. Assisted living, just going up moderately. Health center is going up moderately, and although there's a lot of impact from the health center, we're anticipating actually more volume from the managed care census. And as maybe many of you all know, Medicare on average pays us about $505 a day as an average for a stay when you're coming back from the hospital. If you're a managed care patient, the company typically gets about $300 a day. And they essentially demand the same service, but we get paid a whole lot less. With managed care, we're either at a break even or probably at an operating loss. So although it tends to be a smaller amount of the census, the last thing we want to do is tell the resident who's been here for 10, 15 years, they'd switch to a managed care program for whatever reason. No, we can't serve you. Yes, we can serve you. You come here, we have a bed for you. But still, we have to live with the disparity of revenue compared to the cost, and we're seeing that census increase. It used to be 3 to 4. Now we're anticipating it's going to be more in the 7 to 8 range. And multiply that times 365 days, it has a little bit more of an impact. So here's our anticipated revenue. Once we get the census number, we can determine our revenue. We're anticipating our revenue to go up $1.4 million almost, $1.388 million. Operating expenses are going up $435,000, and that's the direct just from activities and nursing and pharmacy, therapy, lab, and x-ray. That's our direct expense. Gives us a gross contribution of $7 million versus $6 million, what we are anticipating for this year. Next page would have all the indirect expense, which is food service. Even though food service is a direct expense, since it's one department that covers the campus, we call it an indirect. We do allocate it out by meal count, but still the reason, since it's covering the whole campus instead of specifically assisted living or houses or apartments or skilled nursing, it's considered indirect or a campus expense. Same with plant maintenance, housekeeping, and admin in general. Food service is wage and supply cost. It's raw food. Plant maintenance, think real estate taxes are in there, which we're only anticipating a 5% increase. And the just cost of refurbishment. We're seeing more and more expense in the aging buildings of maintaining those buildings. Housekeeping and laundry has a moderate expense, and that's typically wage and admin in general. Under there is the insurance. Except for our liability, we went with Caring Communities last year, and true to form, their expense increase only was less than 2% to us. And that's one of the reasons why we went with them, is because it's a risk retention group. They insure only like communities like us, even though it's across the country. But they really know this industry, and they have good risk management programs in place, and they're able to keep the costs down. Where we're seeing the increases in property and everything else. I think our property insurance went up 24%. I mean, it's not the entire, part of the pie, but it's a piece of the pie. But it was a fairly large piece of the pie. So that's pretty much what into admin in general. Entrance fees, earned entrance fees, that's just the amortization of the contracts for the community over the lifespan of, and it's a lifespan based on, IRS rules, which are long. Forfeitures are representative of those contracts that are canceled prematurely. So if there's anticipated that the life expectancy would have been 12 years and it was canceled 8 years out, then those 4 years remaining is what is representative in the forfeitures. But the way the calculation works, though, it's a declining balance method. It never gets to zero. It just take this amount and divide it by 8 years, then the next year is take this amount and divide it by 7 years, and it's just a declining how it works out. So it's never really reached zero. Other revenues are just miscellaneous from application fees or transportation or laundry, very little. Interest and dividends, we're effectively only anticipating a 5% return on the investments in our SunTrust, the unrestricted SunTrust. So that's only income from the unrestricted investments. Doesn't have anything to do with Love and Care or any of those. That's not even budgeted. Because it's not a money source that we can tap into other than for its purpose. It's not an unrestricted operating. Then depreciation and amortization, interest expense gives us a net income loss, actually a net loss. We're anticipating $409,000 this year. For the budget, we're anticipating $253,000 loss. But that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is when you add back the depreciation expense and subtract out the amortization of entrance fees, we have a cash income loss of $383,000 compared to an anticipated of $638,000. But we do get entrance fees. We're just from the activity that we expect to reach those census numbers, we have to have a certain amount of move-ins. And those certain amount of move-ins with the average entrance fees equal that $2,991,000. Historically, we put in an assumption that there's going to be 10% of that would be paid out in refunds. We have our principal payments, we have our capital expenditures, and we do have a contingency in case we've missed something. It's a fairly large contingency, but not anticipating that we'll use it, but you never know. Which could potentially leave us with a cash positive of $153,000. So after all the revenues are generated, all the expenses are paid out, all the entrance fees are received, all the refunds are paid out, we should have $153,294 by the end of the year. Just this last part, what Joe was talking about, one of the things that we put in place this year was a wage compression bonus. It was another incentive that we thought when we did let me back up. When we did the rate adjustment for staff, like the CNAs, I think we went from $12 to $12.50 to $13.50 an hour. And that's what the area was doing. So we had to put something in place if we wanted to keep staff. The challenge is if you've been here 5-ish years or more, and all of a sudden the person that's just being hired is making equal or more than what you were hired at or you've been working all these years for, we saw that as a compression problem. So that essentially, didn't want to have a scenario of I have to quit and leave here to come back and get a raise, which I think you've somewhat experienced that before. So we calculated a compression bonus amount, but we didn't want to necessarily just give it out carte blanche. We wanted to put in almost a pay for performance. So what we did is we calculated what that bonus could potentially be based on the number of staff that we had. We put a seniority factor to it. So if you're here 1 year versus you've been here 30 years, the person here 30 years would get a higher factor than the person that just started. But there's at least a little bit of an incentive. So essentially it's, if you clock in and out on time and work your hours, then you're going to get a little bit of incentive pay on top of your normal hourly rate. And it equates out to anywhere from 55 cents an hour more to 75 cents an hour more, depending on your seniority. So it's a way for, the more hours you work, a little bit higher rate of pay that you will get. And it's that way, I think it's, well, just to give you an idea, this is an indication how it may have worked, is when we rolled it out September 1st. And we did it for the first 3 pay periods because we had some technical glitches. But anyway, it was averaging about $4,500 a pay period is what was costing the company. This last pay period, which was the second time we ran it, that number is more at $7,400 for the pay period. So we're seeing staff really getting on board with this and more people working. And will be a benefit for us in the long run because more staff working means less agency. Agency is literally double to triple what our staff cost us. So if we can incentivize our staff to stay here and work the hours without hopefully getting burnt out, it'd be less cost in the long run in using agency. So what that long story is to explain that bottom section there, is we originally anticipated that the wage compression for this year would have been $172,000, that second number to the bottom. But when we actually put the numbers in the budget model of who's here and their seniority and whatnot, the number actually came in at $138,000. But that's if everyone comes in and out and clocks in and out on time and works a full shift for the entire year. Most likely that's not going to take place, but still our ceiling would be the $138,000 based on the staff that we have here today. So even our anticipated, when we originally calculated, we were conservative. What has come in for the budget is much less, and most likely that number will be even less as the year works out. And I put in what I saw the soft allocation is essentially that with that rate is what we anticipated it to be over the next 3 to 4 years, and as a measurement tool for when we get over that hump of the wage, this is what our hump that we need to get over. So this is the anticipated cost of what this policy that we put in place will be over collectively 4 years. So it's just there for a measurement tool for when we go down the road. Next. Okay. So one thing that's nice, another thing that we monitor is what is our daily spend? What are we spending on a daily basis? So when you look at all of our expenses and divide by calendar days, you can see that back in December of 2019, we were spending on almost $40,000 a day. So all the wages, all the supplies, all the food, all the insurance, refurbishment, contract labor, contract, landscaping, whatnot. Everything that we were spending, it was costing the company $39,667 per day. And just in barely, not even 2 short years, we've dropped that to $33,503. And just to give you, significance, June compared to September, and that's a $1,000 drop. You know, we're at 90 days between the two, so that's 90 days times 1,000, that's $90,000 that we're essentially lowered our expense bill. So it's, you just take the amount, divide and multiply it times the number of days between, and that's, you get an idea of what savings that your managers have been doing in managing their business. So it's an important number to track. Our days cash on hand are 302 compared to 229 in June of last year.
David?
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
Does that, I was looking at that line, does that mean that in effect, on any day in the year, you've got 9 million in the bank?
So 302 times 33,000 is the amount of money we have in the bank. So that's checking account, savings account, money market account, minimum liquid reserve we can count. Because the reason we count this number is because the state of Florida requires us to maintain at least 100 days. And they say that you can include the minimum liquid reserve, which is the 5.9. Is it 5.9? So essentially, yeah, all of our cash that we can have access to divided by calendar or that spend per day, and that gives us the number of days of cash that we have. So yes, that's exactly the amount. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Any questions? Trying to keep it short, but not too, over. Yes, sir. Yes, he's asking if there's a 401k plan to the employees. Yes, there is. The company matches 4% for the staff who puts in up to 4%. If they contribute up to 4%, we'll match up to 4%. I'm sorry? Yes. Yeah, that's been a benefit. But they can contribute up to 20, 30%, but we cap ours at 4%. And we offer health insurance, long-term disability. The employee pays a portion on the health insurance. We have other ancillary benefits, but those are typically a pass-through. So dental we pay a little bit, or
Copay.
How much are people, as a department, have to pay per month
4.5% more.
than what we were paying
right.
now?
Right.
Yep, the rate increase is 4.5% rounded to the nearest dollar.
In other words, it's different for different people.
Or most departments are different. There's a spattering that are all the same.
For the employees,
I-
incentive, like a sliding scale for the employees to stay longer.
Well, I guess you could say there is a sliding scale for the employees on the compression bonus because we give a more weight to the bonus based on length of service. No, the retirement, he's asking if the retirement, there's a sliding scale. It's the same for everyone. If they contribute up to the first 4% that they contribute, the company will match the 4%. But there's no sliding scale that it goes up. Right. Well, I mean, he's asking if the person stays longer, is there more incentive them to be able to contribute or participate? To answer, the short answer is no. We just have the 4% match. But one of the things I do here that I do at most of the companies I've worked for, and I've been told that I'm the only one that does this, is quarterly lack of better words, evaluate the investments that we're able to invest in it's a 403B. 401k, 403B is essentially the same thing. And what I typically do is I look at the change in share price. I don't try to evaluate that how many dividends this person got or this fund got, I just look at the change in share price. If the change in share price went up 30%, it went up 30%. And there's some of our funds will go up that high, and some of them will lose. And I've been doing this, and I rank who's the top 10, and I hand that out to all the staff and let them, because about half the staff invest in what we have a fixed income fund, just because they don't know. I mean, fixed income fund isn't bad. It's fixed at 3.5%, which is almost unheard of in this industry. But others have taken the advice and invested and are getting 15, 20-ish% return on their 401k. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, that's one of the things I do. And from what I understand, some staff are appreciative and they take advantage of it.
Any other questions for David? If not, thank you, David. I'm going to ask Amanda and Etta to come up. Etta is going to cover, we're going to jump around a little bit on the agenda because I know Etta and Samantha have other places they need to be as well. So Etta, would you please give us the update on spiritual life? Thank you.
Well, we're moving into the favorite part of my season, if I can say my favorite season. We're on the verge of Advent coming up, and so you'll be seeing information in your Hunter Herald and your Now Read This. The Spiritual Life Committee have already ordered, and we have received the Advent booklets for this year, so those will be passed out probably either next week or week after, because the last Sunday of this month will be the first Sunday of Advent, so I'll make sure that you have those in plenty of time. We're also scheduling our Thanksgiving service, which Carol Larson, Jerry Larson, and myself actually worked on yesterday, and you'll be pleased to know we got it completed yesterday. We're going to do a Thanksgiving Eve service, which Eve for us will be 2:30 in the afternoon. It's going to be a time of song and praise and scripture. There won't be a sermon, but we're going to tell the Thanksgiving story and kind of give our thanks through hymns and different scriptures matched up with those hymns. And it'll be here in the chapel, and so you'll get information about that. Blue Christmas, we actually have 2 opportunities to participate in Blue Christmas, which is the recognition of those who have passed over the last year. First Presbyterian Church will do theirs on December the 1st at 6 in the afternoon. We will not have transportation from the homes going there, and they will not have a bus available to take those in the community who want to go. But if you want to carpool with your neighbor, a couple of you ride together, I'll make sure that information is made available to you, because the following Wednesday, we will also have a Blue Christmas service here on campus. And I'll do much like I did last year. I will do a separate service for the health center, those in Mcgrath. I'll do a service for those in assisted living. And then independent living and residential living, we will combine your service here in the chapel. That way everybody has an opportunity to participate or attend that would like to do so for that service. We have a few memorial services and interments that are coming up for the month of November, beginning of December, for families who have waited until some of our COVID restriction has been lifted. And so I'll advertise those as well. Dean Hudson, you'll see that one come out. It's for Saturday, November 13th at 10 o'clock here in the chapel. Sam Rec is for November 21st at 4 o'clock. And that will be down in the Memorial Gardens. And as they begin to give me the information, I'll make sure that you have that. If you want to attend, just reach out to me and let me know. So far, we've been good with the numbers, and I want to keep that until our clinical team sees fit for us to increase our numbers. But right now, we're keeping the indoor numbers here in the chapel at 30 or less. And when we meet down at the Memorial Gardens, I'm asking that we keep the numbers there 15 or less, because we have our seating there, and that makes it comfortable. And so far, I haven't gotten any complaints from families. I've gotten a lot of compliments. I want to thank Dick Huggins for helping me through this season, because he's been helping me not only with chapel but also with services there. And as far as I know, he hasn't gotten any complaints about things. We've gotten nothing but compliments on how the garden is coming together. So if you get a chance, walk down. I've been encouraging folks, now that the weather's changed, get outside, take that time and give thanks and praise to God in your walk, and walk down to the Memorial Gardens and just see the progress that's being made there. It really is a beautiful sight. I look forward to the strategic planning beginning in January, now that my team that I co-chair has gotten the approval for us to go forth, and you'll see information on that as we begin to recruit volunteers for that. But I want to just thank you for your participation, your support, your camaraderie, you're encouraging one another. And remember, it's harvest season, it's autumn. And in autumn, there's an ingathering. And the ingathering is a positive, uplifting time. So let's remain that way on our campus. If there's any negative news that's spreading around, nip it in the bud and change it around with something positive. There's always something positive. And if you have a question about something, feel free to ask a member of the management team or the executive team. Please don't go from person to person and spread things around, because that's how we kind of get out of whack and out of touch as a community. So do that for us. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. Many of you know that. I'm readily available, and all that I can tell you, I will. But please, let's do that in this season. Let's turn this season around. We've had so much negativity for COVID. Let's turn it around and really make it a harvest time for us in Thanksgiving time and moving on to Christmas as we celebrate the announcement of our coming Lord and Savior, because he is coming again. Thank you.
Thank you, Etta. Thank you. Thank you, Etta. Appreciate you. Samantha? Thanks, Sam.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just have some quick updates. I won't keep you long. November the 5th, which is Friday, we will be inviting the Caribbean Queen food truck to come back to service the entire community. We had them out Friday, but it wasn't for, a lot of people didn't get an opportunity to attend, so we was asked to have them come out again, so we are gonna accommodate. Then we're gonna, just a quick reminder that bingo is back up and running in the sunroom, 6 p.m. on Saturdays. So we have continued that, we're free and clear. November the 9th is gonna be our veteran ceremony. We're doing it a little early because we wanna take care of our AL and PMG residents, and if the weather permits, we'll be in the Hollyberry Garden. Just wanna say thank you and give for all their service and support they've done for us. November the 10th is a Wednesday, and we want to do a garden celebration and a thank you to Miss Donna Jones and all the wonderful volunteers and donors and just everybody that put so much love in that AL garden. It's beautiful. So if you have an opportunity to come over to the AL, please stop by and see it. The residents really loves it. It's waking up their spirits. And I believe that day is going to be a beautiful day for us to enjoy. November the 16th, right here in the chapel at 1 p.m., we also going to be hosting with the Alzheimer's Association, warning signs of Alzheimer's, 10 warning signs, excuse me. So please wear your mask and come on in and get some education on that. Just give great support on helping us with our Alzheimer's and dementia. And so that's wonderful that we'll be having that. We want to try to pick up on November the 17th to take our AL residents out to lunch to Olive Garden. And if the positivity rate still allow, that's going to be our goal. We have not given up, so we're going to keep trying, but we have to also meet the guidelines. As long as everything goes well, we will proceed with our plan. November the 19th, this is going to be early because we got to have resident council on that Friday due to the fact that when we normally have resident council, it would have been on Thanksgiving. And so we're not going to give up our Thanksgiving holiday. We want you to love on each other, spend some time with your family. So we'll do that November 19th at 10 on the second floor in the AL building. And if all goes well, once again, because due to COVID, we never know, things change at a moment's time, we want to bring back the birthday bashes that you had in the main dining room at 2 p.m. So keep your fingers crossed on that as well. So we were really trying, but once again, we at the mercy of if anything changed, we change this as well.
Be sure you contact Publix on those texts.
Ma'am?
So be sure you contact Publix on this
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Stand in order. Yes, we will. We know Publix is one of our faves and great supporters as well. And then November the 30th, we're going to be asking for volunteers and help because we'll be pulling out Christmas trees, decorations, and getting ready for the Merry, Merry holidays of Merry Christmas. Anything else come up, we'll be happy to put it in the Daily Scoop or to now read this as things occur. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. So we know that Mary Willis has her retirement party in Helen Berry that'll be kicking off shortly. So the last section that we had here was a COVID update and overview. So just briefly, we have 0 cases right now, 0 residents, 0 staff. We're moving to only testing those staff who have not been vaccinated. The epidemiologist has looked at our reporting and has determined that we no longer have to test twice weekly of our staff. We're at 87% of our staff have been vaccinated. You may recall prior to the vaccine mandate, we were at about 51% for months. So with the mandate, we're now at about 87% vaccinated, which is a testament to our staff. I'm very appreciative of them for doing that and moving forward. So, some have still not been vaccinated. The cutoff day was today. We're requesting 30 more days for them to get the vaccine, to give them a little more extra time to get it done. The other reason for that delay in carrying it another 30 days is we work, a lot of our residents have caregivers that come in from outside agencies. Not a lot, but a few of the residents have people they bring in from the outside to provide caregiver support. We're also mandating them that they have to provide vaccine card, vaccine proof. And some of the agencies have been slow to do that, so we're saying they've got to hold until they get that information to us. And we've given them another 30 days to get that information. So we're reviewing reasonable accommodations for about 8 of our staff to determine what those reasonable accommodations are. And we're notifying and working with them individually. We're working with our medical director, Dr. Daniel Haight, to determine what those reasonable accommodations are. So in the interim, we'll be requesting that they wear an N95 mask and that they wear a shield and that they're tested twice a week. For anyone who's unvaccinated at staff, we're going to continue to test them twice weekly. So we're getting that review and making sure. Anyone of our staff who's symptomatic, we're going to test with rapid testing immediately. And if they have symptoms, we're going to send them home. So it's moving in the right direction. You know, it's obvious that to get from 51 to 87%, it's moving in the right direction. We want to continue that progress and get us to 100%. That's the goal. Any other, I'm trying to think what else. Let's see. In Port of Mcgrath, they had their Joint Commission survey. That's not a public survey. It's not a survey that's presented as public information. It's a certification for the health center for Port of Mcgrath. So we received their report. We're now putting in place the tools to address the concerns that were brought to the report. None of the concerns were of major level. They were all pretty minor, which means they only affected 1 or 2 individuals, and the severity of their findings was very minimal. There was no major severity of risk to residents. So all in all, the JACO survey went really well. So with that, I think we've covered just everything on the agenda. Are there other questions or comments or thoughts or concerns that you guys would like to share? Please.
I don't have a concern. First of all, I think that the food services people have done an outstanding job. I mean, I've never had one bad meal and all that kind of everything I visit this company.
Yeah.
I hated being alone so much, and it was so lonely and terrible that I want to eat both of my noon and dinner meals downstairs.
It's the, no, it's going to stay this way for the existing residents. If we put out a new contract, Paula, that would be the opportunity for existing residents to say, I want to go into a new contract. But if they go into a new contract, it'll be at the new pricing. So I kind of doubt that most residents are going to want to do that, because we set up a pricing for new residents that's higher than it was for the existing residents.
So we just continue to pay we get our 1 meal a day at noon for.
Right.
And then we pay $7 at night for which is $210 right?
Yep, whatever your contract in the program, that's it, it doesn't change.
Okay, that's fine, it's fine with me. You cannot eat for what we, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry at all. I'm just so happy. I think they've done a terrific job.
Thank you for sharing that.
I don't like everything, but nobody liked everything I made.
Is anyone on the phone? Anyone have comments or questions? And the folks on the phone? Any other comments or questions or thoughts? Hi, Ella.
We were down at the Memorial Garden, not last Friday, but the Friday before, and it is very rude. I appreciate the way it has been set up. The cross is not something beautiful. It's a wooden cross, and it makes you feel like that is what a cross should be. And so I want to thank everybody who's made contributions to that. And I want to say that Ella and Dick Huggins did a fine job when we had my husband's memorial service. And I had a lot of comments from people who came in from outside. They thought it was a good service. And
Wonderful.
so we get wonderful service here when we ask for it and when we need it.
Thanks, Ella. Just a quick on the Memorial Garden. So all the hardscape is finished. Now, in this month, we're working on the plantings. So you're going to start to see the plants going in over the next couple of weeks. And then once that's done, we'll do a blessing, and we'll hold a blessing service of the Memorial Garden. So really looking forward to that, and thank you for sharing that. Any other comments, thoughts, questions, ideas? And thank you all for being here. Thank you very much. Be well. Thanks. Good.